Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have a special guest with us who's come from Geneva. She's Dr. Joanne Liu. She is the international president of Médecins Sans Frontières, MSF in short, which is a very well-known global organization which has been for years been working in the area of humanitarian medicines, taking health and accessible medicines to the needy around the world. A very well-known organization. They've been a recipient of a Nobel Prize in 1999. More recently, in 2014, they worked in Africa on Ebola, and they reached there at a time when people were confused. The global health experts didn't know how to tackle the epidemic which broke out in Africa. And their volunteers, they lost lives in the process. They made sacrifices. They've been in Afghanistan, and recently when there was an attack on an Afghan hospital, the MSF volunteers were there. They lost lives. They work in India too. So they come with a lot of credentials. So welcome to our show, Dr. Joanne Liu. So what brings you to India?
Well, what brings me to India is each year we have some what we call a meeting with all our staff, and then we reflect on our different activities in the country, but as well worldwide. So I was coming to meet our teams here and discuss with them.
Yeah. So I believe you do look at India. I read some of your interviews and write-ups. You consider India as one of the pharmacies of the world. So that reminded me of and you also worked in Africa. So that reminded me of a recent event when many heads of state, African states, came to India on the invitation of our Prime Minister. And one of the things that they told the Prime Minister was exactly that India is a pharmacy of the world, and India contributes to cheap generic medicines of good quality to deal with diseases like AIDS, hepatitis, and what have you. And the African heads of state, in fact, they urged our Prime Minister and our government that India should stay that way and should not come under pressure from global multinational companies who may want that role a bit diluted in favor of some higher profits for them. So I noticed that MSF also has a similar view. So how do you see India as a global pharmacy, as you describe, and how do you see India evolving from here?
Well, India has been, I would say, a role model in terms of creating and making accessible good quality medicine, generic medicine to the rest of the world. Yeah. And one I would say of the stark example that we have is with antiretroviral medicine, that way back in the late 90s, when the fact that India was able to produce generic of good quality allowed to decrease the price of antiretroviral medicine to treat HIV from more than $10,000 to less than $300 on a yearly basis. Okay. This allowed, thousands and thousands of people who were desperate for care to get access to what I call a life-saving medicine that was antiretroviral medicine.
Yeah. And you work with about 200,000 HIV patients globally as part of your projects?
Yeah.
MSF projects?
Yes. So
you're saying that India contributed to bringing down the cost from $10,000 to how much you said?
In fact, it's around $350 on a yearly basis. So it was $10,000 to $350.
Okay, that's a huge fall in the price of medicines. And how did this help MSF's activity around the world in terms of access to the needy, access of HIV medicines to the needy. Did you suddenly increase your access to those who needed these medicines around the world?
Well, what happened is back then for us, it would have been very, very costly and very difficult to purchase a medicine that costs $10,000 a year for all those patients.
Yeah.
But it didn't only allow MSF, but it allows so many international organizations to do it,
Sure.
like small NGO, WHO. Everybody end up having access and could scale up the number of patients who could be finally treated for a deadly disease. And we see the same phenomena today on something that is actually touching India, which is hepatitis C. We have right now a medicine that costs several, $1,000s. And then if we were to look, I know that here gold is a big thing, but from gram to gram, the treatment for hepatitis C is 67 times the price of gold. So having access to a generic for the treatment of hepatitis C will make a huge difference. We have 12 million people in India who is affected by hepatitis C.
Okay, 12 million people.
Yeah.
And you're saying gram to gram, it's 67 times costlier than gold.
Yeah.
And so that you're trying to bring home the criticality of pricing of medicines.
Yeah, because basically what happened when you put on the market a good quality generic, what it allows to do, it creates competition. And basically people have choices instead of being faced with monopoly.
Yeah.
So that is the key thing. And then competition allows for price to be reduced and then brings accessibility for the most needy. Otherwise, the one who's going to have access are the one who can afford it. And we do think, the bottom line of this is we believe that medicine shouldn't be a luxury. We think that...
Yeah, I read about what one of your interviews, you said it should be a public good,
Yes.
medicines.
Medicine should be... I strongly believe personally, but I think many of us do believe that health should be a public good, and therefore health and medicine are a public responsibility. So we should do our utmost to make it reachable for everybody and accessible.
Tell me, you have also, you have argued, now you work with WHO, UN organizations, right? And other NGOs too, right? Yours is your organization collaborates with others.
Collaborates, yeah, in
Right.
the field, yes.
Now, tell me, what is your sense, you and the other organizations that you collaborate with, do you feel that that the global pharma industry is increasingly putting pressure on countries which have developed as pharmacies of the world, as you said, to dilute that status and shift some of the benefits flowing to the poor, shift that to translate into higher profits for them? Is that happening through various trade agreements, a Transpacific Partnership? There's also one regional cooperation economic partnership where Japan, China, India, several East Asian countries are also there. They're trying to reach a regional agreement where pharma and medicines, cost of medicines, and how much profit should multinationals get is an issue. So, how do you participate or push your thinking in these trade talks?
Well, MSF has been going through a campaign, what we call Hands Off Medicine. And basically, what is our take is the fact that reinforcement of intellectual property doesn't foster for access for medicine.
Yeah.
But as well, right now, the predominant narrative from those big pharmacy, they say we need reinforcement of intellectual property because that's what is fostering for innovation.
Okay.
We don't believe that it does that because innovation is not driven by intellectual property, but innovation is driven by needs. It's when we need something that we create it.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. You're right. But one often hears this argument coming from the business side, from the global companies that there is a need, of course, but they spend a certain amount on research and development, R&D, which they have to recover. Now, in a way, R&D should also be a public good. I think nations should contribute to R&D. Governments should contribute to R&D and create innovations. But unfortunately, it's mostly done by the private sector. So how do you balance the need of the private sector recovering their R&D costs and yet producing medicines which are affordable? So is there a golden mean, or how does it work?
Well, I do believe that we should find a solution for that. And then one of the things that we've been advocating very, very strongly, especially, after the Ebola epidemic, is the fact that the research and development current model is failing patients. Okay. And then we've seen it, Ebola, the virus was discovered in 1976. Despite that, no vaccine, no treatment, no rapid diagnosis. So what happened is the fact that when we got the first few cases, we had nothing to offer for patients except what we call palliative care or comfort care.
And when did you see the first few cases? When did you get the first few cases, MSF?
The first few cases that were confirmed was in March 2014.
Okay.
And then we started to reopen centers, and then we rang the alarm, we told the world, but I think the world was not listening back then. It's only in the summer of 2014, on August 8, that the WHO declared the public health of emergency of international concern.
Okay.
But we had no tools to really tackle the Ebola epidemic. And one of the things that is clear to us is if we want, because there's a lot of right now concern about epidemic and what we call biological threat.
Yeah.
And the best way to prepare ourselves, because the reality, we don't know what will be the exact next threat, bio threat, but it's to prepare ourselves by pushing for research and development on potential bio threat, like the flu, like MERS, like different virus like this. And so what we need to do is to allow some, a financing of that is completely dealing from profit. And so what we are...
How do you do that?
Well,
it's a good idea.
We are advocating to create what I call a global funds for the planet,
from profits,
and to delay the profit.
Because this idea was also discussed in a different context at the Paris conference on climate change,
right,
where they said a fund could be created for green innovation, which is dealing from profit. Similarly, a fund could be created, global fund for pharma. For pharmaceuticals, for affordable medicines, which is dealing from innovations, which is dealing from profits.
Right.
So how do you have a conception of this?
So we are right now discussing that with the WHO, with different big stakeholders, and see, is there a way to create something that will allow funding of research and development on diseases that is somehow not, look as a profitable market. But the reality, because a lot of people are portraying, this as a market failure, but as well, for me, it's a lack of vision for public health. If we were to have public health as our utmost, objective, then there would be no doubts that we would need to create a fund that would allow to bring response and treatment for some of those neglected diseases or off-the-radar diseases.
So essentially, it's a political issue. For this, political pressure from below could force governments to come together and create a fund for something like this, which is dealing from profit, right?
Yes, it is. It is somehow what I call some political will, and it's key today in changing, the landscape. And the reality, I think, that we will never emphasize enough what Ebola has taught us, and then no one wants to repeat what happened. On the other hand, we are really concerned about what we call health security. And health security, everything that is around health health security, and then right now one of the big concern is antimicrobial resistance, or what we call as well drug resistance infection, is how to tackle that. That when we know now that many antibiotics are not working to treat some of the simple diseases like a urinary tract infection or like more complex things like tuberculosis. And so we need to make sure that we're going to get the right treatment available for everybody. And one of the things, as I always say, is you may have your grandmother who will survive a triple bypass in a hospital, but is going to die of pneumonia because we don't have the right antibiotic to treat her. We should not allow this to happen. And it's not because we don't know that it's there, we know. So we need the political will to make sure that we will create the right tools to tackle those diseases.
And you know, as you say, you talk about health security in a country like India, where a good 700 to 800 million people, perhaps even more, live on less than maybe $2.50 a day. You have a huge chunk of the population which one health problem in the family, one serious health issue can set them back, and you know they could go below the poverty line. You know, so it's a very kind of they live very tenuous lives. You know, so in that context also, a country like India. So, what sort of health policy do you think that India should have? Because there is criticism domestically that India does not spend enough on health. Our health spend is barely 1% of GDP, whereas China is about 3% of GDP. Other developed countries are even more than that. So what would be your recommendation?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm a competent person to say, you know, what India needs and per se. I think that India has a lot of challenges. But one of the things that we know is like a healthy individual make a healthier collective society. And so I would say that today India is I would say one of the strongest and biggest nations who have so much potential. But if they were to have, you know, and be able to foster and implement universal health coverage, that would make such a huge difference, because you will become, I would say, one of the first nations of the world for sure, with all the know-how and the competences. So I think that this is something, but there's a lot of challenges, you know, about that, and we're not the competent organization. What we do here in India is to provide medical care access to the most needy and the most vulnerable. But this is something that everywhere people should strive for that, and then somehow build capacity and policies that will allow for this.
But you do strongly feel that India should not only retain but also strengthen its current intellectual property rights regime, which indeed encourages scaling up of generics of patent drugs in India, and which also encourages compulsory licensing of drugs where there's a public emergency, right, health emergency. So India should strengthen this and not come under pressure from the developed countries or global pharma companies to dilute this, because there was some concern expressed in some news reports that recently Indian officials met the American US trade representatives and gave some kind of a vague assurance that even if there is a law which protects compulsory licensing, in its implementation, India will try to avoid you know, commercial licensing, licensing or compulsory licensing of drugs on commercial basis. Are you worried about that?
Oh, we are deeply concerned, and then and I really do hope that the government here will not give in to some of those pressure about reinforcement of intellectual property. Right now, the Indian government always have a flexible, I would say, ruling around intellectual property, and I've used in the past the compulsory licensing in 2012 for a cancer drug who allow patients to get access to this specific medicine, and has been a role model, has been a leader. But I think it's probably one of the biggest contributions that India has done in terms of global health contribution on the international arena. So to give up on that, India has been the superhero in terms of drugs access, and we still want that superhero. The world is not ready to give up on his superhero.
Sure, and it's probably one of the biggest Make in India stories. This government is talking about Make in India. It's encouraging a Make in India policy where things, products, services are made in India for the rest of the world. I'm sure you would agree that generics are already a success story in the context of Make in India, right?
Well, to a certain extent, yes. He has, put I would say, on India a lot of credit on his contribution in terms of access to medicine around the world, not only in India, but around the world.
But tell me, how worried are you that certain regional trade arrangements like the Transpacific Partnership, which has been sealed, the US is part of that, Japan, a lot of Pacific countries. And I read reports that the Transpacific Partnership is trying to create a different regime for generics, even for off-patent drugs. They are creating a regime where multinationals can do minor innovation and continue their patents over it. Will that impact the current arrangements that we have around the world? Say within WTO, what India is doing is perfectly all right. India is WTO compatible. But if these regional arrangements with countries, contributing to 60–70% of world GDP, if they come up with other arrangements which dilute the present one, multilaterally being followed, is that a risk?
Oh, we think it's a slippery slope, and we think there's high risk, and we have been denouncing the TPP agreement, and we do hope that people will resist. The agreement has been signed but not ratified yet by the countries, and we do hope that we're going to be able to convince some of the key countries or generic makers to resist the ratification, because otherwise, again, it's going to be blockade to access to medicine. And I think this just to come back on the idea of patent, and then we do understand that somehow creating a medicine, you should have a return on investments.
Sure.
And then there's other models that we can explore. And right now, I was discussing with my staff, and we have what we call, for phones, for mobile phones, we have what we call essential patent.
Yeah.
Basically, instead of creating a monopoly, once you create something, it allows people to replicate, but you have royalties if people copy you. And then that's a completely different mindset. I think that we have been, I would say, very narrow-minded about intellectual property and how we can apply it.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Joanne Liu, for talking to us. Some of your ideas, I hope they do take shape on a bigger scale in the future, and hoping that MSF continues to do some of its good work that it's doing. Thank you very much for talking to us. That's all we have in this edition of State of the Economy. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.